everybody. Thanks for joining. I am so excited you're here, and we are a few minutes late because we are troubleshooting my slow computer and embracing imperfection, right? And Yalda has been so gracious and helping me troubleshoot throughout the process. So, thanks again for joining. And if you're just now coming on or listening to the replay, I would love for you to put some comments in the chat or send me a message afterwards or post whatever you'd like, because this is just such an important topic. And I really appreciate you guys coming on and supporting my new show that is an adjunct to Two Mamas to Love. So this I call Mental Backroads and Highways. And the reason why I wanted to start this as well is because there is so much we need to talk about with mental health and advocacy and promoting growth in ourselves and society. And I just think it's so important. So I wanted to make this separate show just to focus on that, to have previous guests from Two Mamas to Love on here, new guests. And actually, Yalda, I just posted my Two Mamas to Love episode with her. And so definitely check that out. And it goes more into her story. So I'm going to introduce my incredible guest and a little bit about mental backroads and highways. But first, let me talk to you about Yalda. Yalda Kazemi. She is a speaker, author, and a mental health advocate, educator, aiming to shift perspectives and raise awareness about the realities of mental illness and foster a culture of well-being on an individual, family, workplace, and community level. Yalda has personal experience overcoming severe postpartum mental illness. This led her mission to be a voice of those that suffer in silence and to raise awareness and break stigmas associated with mental illness. And Yalda has spoken to audiences around the world and has been featured on multiple TV shows, radios, podcasts, and publications, where she shares strategies and tips from her book and lived experience to provide an all-encompassing approach to mental health and wellness. So she's just incredible. And she has such a raw and real episode that she spoke with me about. So definitely check that out. It's available on Apple, Spotify, Google, Two Mamas to Love. Talking about things we do not talk about, episode 82. And Yalda, thank you so much for coming and talking with us today and helping us with this mental backroad of how do we grow with mental health awareness, both in ourselves and in society. So thank you again.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be chatting with you again and to be a part of your new show as well. And like I've mentioned before, I'm very grateful for individuals such as yourself for the work that you're doing and helping to create change in this space and advocate and raise awareness. And I just think it's these continued authentic, genuine, vulnerable conversations that are the ways by which we can create impact and make a change in this space. And I'm just very honored to be a part of this.
Oh, thank you so much. I am so honored as well. Thank you, Yalda.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a bit about your journey and what brought you to this mission and how you started becoming such an incredible advocate for mental health?
Yeah, so for me, the journey really began after I went through a postpartum mental health illness after the birth of my son in 2013. And prior to that, I never dealt with a mental illness myself before. I obviously knew people in my life who had. I studied psychology in school, so I have that, theoretical kind of technical bit of a background when it comes to mental health. I did have knowledge about it, but nothing about the area of postpartum. And so when I became faced with it, it was just something completely new. It was something that was a huge learning curve for myself, my family, my friends, colleagues. And after overcoming a very rare and severe case of postpartum mental illness, which took about 2.5 years. And, it came to the point where I almost took my son's life and I asked to be hospitalized in a psychiatric ward for a few weeks. that kind of set the trajectory of my life on a different path. And it allowed me to think about doing something good with such a horrific experience. And so I wanted to create impact and make a change, particularly in this space of the postpartum and perinatal mental health and just women's mental health in general. I now also talk about perimenopause and menopause as well, but just really helping people understand what some of these conditions can entail, what some of the symptoms are, what to look out for, how to get help, what support people can provide. So it was really just going through that personal experience that really put me on a mission to make a change. And also because I realized, especially in the area of postpartum and perinatal, it is so highly stigmatized, as is mental health in general, but particularly the subset, because there's that added layer of no one wants to admit to having some of the thoughts and emotions that come with this type of mental illness, as it pertains to being a parent or having a new child, or having a lack of love towards your new child, or being ambivalent about the whole idea of parenthood and things like that. And those are difficult conversations that not everyone's comfortable having. Not everyone's comfortable saying, I feel no love towards my child. And because I felt all those things, and deep down inside, I knew I'm not someone devoid of emotion or feeling. I'm someone who's very empathetic, who loves very deeply. But why am I feeling these feelings towards my very own child? That set me on the path to be a voice for some folks that maybe don't feel comfortable enough being vulnerable and openly talking about it. And I just wanted to raise a lot of awareness and help create impact and change.
Mm. That's incredible, Yalda. I think that the vulnerability, you being so brave, sharing your story, and also helping others and making that your mission is just it's beautiful. And I think that's important to recognize that motherhood or life, whatever it is not necessarily what we expect or plan it's going to be. I remember having my life all set out, like just had plans of what year I was going to get married, have a house, and have kids, and all that. And it just, life doesn't work out that way. There's grays, there's sunny days, there's cloudy days, there's thunderstorm days. And how do we release that control, but also know how to lean towards others when you have those stormy days, when you have those cloudy days, because that is so important for that support. I think sometimes, like, when there's a tornado or a storm, when there's obvious damage, community comes together and it's obvious we need help. But when there's an internal thunderstorm in your mind or in your brain, it's not as obvious, but it's just as deafening. It's just as hard internally. But how do you voice it, or how do you even recognize that? And I'm so glad that you're being that advocate for others, whether it be whatever postpartum issues there are, because there's so many. And I think that it's incredible, Yalda, that you're putting a voice to all of these issues and saying, you know what, this was what I experienced, and this is my story, and here's how I overcame it. Here's how I was brave. Here's how I can help others who are going through something similar. And I applaud you for your braveness and for your vulnerability and leadership.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And like I said, I obviously in my book and in a lot of the work that I've done, I do talk about postpartum and perinatal, but for me, that's not the only area that I speak to. That's not the only area I work in. It's not the only area that I advocate for. It's just generally mental health and
Yes.
changing perceptions and people's perspectives on mental illness in general. I've dealt with anxiety later on again in my life. I know people with all sorts of different mental health conditions, and so I need to really state that it just because I do have my own personal experience with the area of postpartum, and that doesn't mean that's the only area that I advocate or focus on, because I just think overall advocating for mental health is important. I think having honest and open conversations are the ways by which people really understand mental illness in a different perspective. There's so much information out there. You can go do a Google search and find a ton of information, all the various types of mental health conditions that there are, on the symptoms, on the signs, things that can help. But I can tell you, as someone who, like I said, I have an educational background in this, no amount of education really taught me what going through it did. And so that's why I kind of just talk about it in a vulnerable way, in a very raw way. If anyone who's ever read my book tells me, oh my God, it is very raw. Like, you talk about all sorts of things. And I talk about even wanting to take my own life and things like that. And the reason I put that out there is because I wanted people to know they're not alone. I wanted people to know that if they're going through something like this, you're not going crazy. There are others who have gone through it, because I'm not the first nor the last who has or who will. And if I can get better, so can you. Because there is nothing that has given me superpowers to be able to get through these, instances or experiences in my life. It's having the right resources in place, having a changed perspective about mental illness that allowed me. And one of the things you and I spoke about in the last podcast we did, and that I always mention, anytime I talk about mental health, is I think the number one place to start is removing self-stigmatization. Because while there's so much stigma around mental health out there towards others, and judgmental thoughts towards others or things like that, a lot of people don't realize we hold that for ourselves as well. So that self-stigmatizing in that I don't have a mental health condition. No, I don't have this. No, I don't have that. I don't need a diagnosis. I'm fine. I can do this. And there's this shame associated with, if you need to ask for help, if you need to admit that you're going through something that's causing you mental distress and it's a struggle and you might have to go to the doctor and get support. I don't know why we have conditioned ourselves to believe that there's something wrong with asking for help, when in fact it is such a sign of courage and strength to have that self-awareness, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think that's the number one place, is remove that stigma for yourselves, from yourselves. Don't see mental illness as something negative. See it as something it's not in people's control. You don't choose to have it. And so what you can do, though, the choice is to get help and ask for help and seek the right resources to get better, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's such great points. And as you're talking, Yalda, I'm putting some clips of your website as well as your book. And whoever's watching this can access your book on your website and has all the information. But it's www.yaldakazemi.com. I'll also put that in the show notes as well. But it's below here on the screen. And I think that everything you're talking about is just we need to talk about. And like you say so eloquently, that we don't talk about things, but we need to shine a light on this. I actually, just before this episode, was dropping my youngest off at preschool. I was driving back home and I saw I don't know what you call it, like some type of billboard, but that you can put information on with the county where we're in. And it gives information about 988. And it says that you matter. And it gives 988, the text, the number, and that in America is the number you would call if you're in crisis, or it's the crisis suicide hotline. And just having resources like that is so important. And I know, Yalda, you talked about in our podcast, there's no shame. And if you're experiencing things that aren't right, then go to the hospital, call 911. There's no shame in that. Can you talk with us about that? I thought that was so beautiful how you explain that to our audience.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, this is stuff we've all been conditioned to believe is wrong to do, is shameful. We should be embarrassed if we have a mental health disorder. We should be embarrassed if we need to ask for help, or it's what are the repercussions? And I understand. I held those very same fears. When I went through my postpartum journey, and that's part of the reason why I held off going to the hospital for such a long time, because I was afraid they're going to take my child away from me. I was afraid of the impact it would have on my future and my life. And it's going to be on my medical records. Oh my God, how will it impact my career and things like that? And, it got to the point where my mental health was in such a state of crisis where I was about to harm my child or potentially myself, that I realized none of those things, none of those worries even matter. First of all, they're not necessarily true. Going to the hospital and asking for help isn't going to impact all those things for me. But it's a stigma that I held on to. It's a negative false belief that I held on to, that I had to release in order to help myself get better. And so I always encourage people that if you're feeling like something isn't right, something doesn't feel right, go to your doctor. Go to your doctor. But if you're in an actual state of distress where you are thinking of harming yourself, thinking of harming others, go to the hospital. Call 911, call a distress line. I will never forget the nurse at the hospital when I told her, I said, I don't care if they take my child away forever from me and I never see him again. I don't want to be the mom that took his life. You need to take him away from me. I can't control my mind right now. And the nurse just, embraced me and was so kind and caring. And she said, we're not going to take your child away from you. Thank you for coming in. Do you know how many people are too afraid to do this? And I thank you for coming in, because all you need is just some help. You're not well right now, but that's all it is. And that reassurance and knowing that this whole time I sat so long on going to the hospital because I was afraid of the repercussions. Meanwhile, once I finally did it, I realized the repercussions weren't even there. They were these false beliefs that I held in my mind. Whereas the hospital is what saved me. The hospital is the reason I am alive here today, and so is my son. And so I always encourage people that asking for help is not this negative thing that we've been conditioned to believe. Asking for help takes so much courage and strength, and to fight for yourself. And that kind of leads to the other point, which I always focus on, is advocate for yourselves. Even if people around you are dismissive, even if they're saying, oh, there's nothing wrong with you, don't worry, you'll be fine, so on and so forth. Everybody has intuition. If your intuition is telling you, I don't feel right, something about me doesn't feel right, go get help. And the source of support doesn't even have to be the typical standard family or close friends or things. The source of support can be anyone who's willing to give you support and compassion, and who's willing to take you seriously and say, you know what, I'm going to help you through this journey. Okay, you're not feeling like yourself. What can we do to help you get better? And I think that's just really important. And then, like I said, changing perspectives. We have been conditioned to have these negative stereotypes and thoughts and stigmas around mental health. Well, the beautiful part about learning things is that we can also unlearn them, right? So none of us come into this world having these beliefs about mental health and mental illness, and things that are right and things that are wrong. We've learned to be the way we are and have these thoughts and beliefs, so we can unlearn the ones that are not serving us and helping us lead fulfilling lives.
Absolutely. And I think that's so much of just why I started the mental backroads, is because we have been conditioned either by ourselves or society or whatever that is to think a certain way, to react a certain way. But when we say, no, I'm going to choose to grow, I'm going to choose to step outside of my comfort zone, or do whatever it is, you little by little grow these new pathways. You get stronger. It's like anything else. Like, I remember when I was training for my half marathon, like it was hard at first,
Mhm.
like, I don't know, even like run a little bit, but then baby steps, you just keep doing it. You keep
Mhm.
doing it, and the brain is a muscle, just like anything else in the body. And the more we work on this, the more we say it's okay to do these things. It's okay to think outside of whatever this paradigm is, put on a
Mhm.
different set of glasses. I think that it's so important. And Yalda, like, you are just so inspiring. You remind me, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing it right, but in Japanese, there's this pottery that's called kintsugi, spelled Kintsugi. And it's replacing broken pottery and ceramics. And the art is putting gold into the cracks, because it is saying being imperfect is what's beautiful.
Mhm.
And that's what's beautiful, are the cracks and the imperfections. And I think this is what we need to start embracing in life. And I'm so glad that you are showing that to everyone, whether that be postpartum issues or other issues in mental health in the workplace with anxiety, whatever that is. It's incredible.
Well, thank you. I'm so touched by all your kind words, and I feel the same way about you. I am so appreciative of the journey that you went through, that you shared with me, and like I said, the work that you're doing, because it's from the heart. It's purposeful,
Yes.
and it is helping to create an impact. You never know how these conversations might save somebody's life today. How
Yes.
tuning into something like this might be the reason that somebody else has the strength to keep going, to fight another day,
Yeah.
just to know that they are not alone and that there's hope. And there's two things I wanted to cover, as we were chatting. One of them that comes up is around the area of culture. The other is resiliency. So
Mhm.
you do, I think a lot of cultural pressures also play into people's beliefs and judgments around mental illness, and also their hesitancy to get help, especially in certain cultures. It's more prevalent. I can definitely say from my culture, I'm Persian by background. In our culture, you typically don't talk about having a mental illness. You don't admit it to others. It's seen as a sign of weakness. It's seen as a sign of something that can hinder your success in life, hinder your ability to have like a relationship in life. Some people won't want to marry you, like things like that, right? And you're conditioned to believe these things, and that's why a lot of people don't ask for help. And it's so awful to see people suffering, to see people being in anguish when they could actually lead such happy, productive lives if they only were able to seek help, for fear of judgment for others. And I think so much of those cultural pressures need to stop, and we need to again advocate for ourselves and fight back to those cultural norms that have been set that really don't serve us, that were set for God knows what reason, and they've just carried on for generations. And we need to stop it, and stop things that are not serving us well, right? And we have to do what makes us feel good at the end of the day. And to that, you were mentioning the Japanese pottery. I think it's such a beautiful analogy to use. It brings me to the topic of resiliency. And I think I consider myself a very resilient person. I talk about
Mhm.
resiliency when I do presentations. And, you know, I don't think we are necessarily just born resilient, right? I think resiliency is something that is a learned behavior, which is why I always encourage people that you can learn to be resilient. You may not have been even in the past, but you can learn to be resilient. And really, resiliency is about changing your perspective the same way you change your perspective about mental illness, in that you learn to see things in a different way. You learn to see positivity in seemingly negative situations, and you learn to find the lessons in them. And you continue to have strength and courage and not give up on yourselves. And so my ability to overcome my mental illness struggles is not because I have a magic wand. It's not because I have superpowers that other people don't possess. It's because I've learned to become resilient by having life kick my behind one too many times, right?
Mhm.
And I have now learned to use that mindset as when negative things happen to me in life. And it's not that I don't grieve and process negative things. It's not that I don't get upset or sad, sometimes, anxious or depressed or whatever. Like, I go through all the emotions just as any other human being does. But what I've learned to do is try to not sit in that for a very long period of time and pull myself out of it, by being resilient and recognizing that, okay, this negative thing happened, but what good can come from it? How can I twist this into something more positive? Is there something good that I can take this as an example of, and use it for my benefit, right? And so that helps me reframe my mind. And at times when I'm feeling my own internal resiliency can't help me, and my, anxiety has gone a little bit over the top, I get medical help. So I can give a personal example. Again, recently I'm at the age where I am in perimenopause, and I always knew, because of my postpartum, because it's hormonal driven for me, that around perimenopause and menopause, I could be hit with mental health struggles again. And it suddenly hit me like a ton of bricks, back in March. And I really, really experienced severe anxiety, pretty much close to the level I had during my postpartum. And it was a struggle for a few months there until I got my mental health back in order. But the difference was I didn't hold off on it like I did during my postpartum. See, I now advocate for myself. I now say, oh, this is something that I just can't do overnight. So I need to go see my doctor now. In my case, I needed medication. Not everybody will, but in my case, I know how my body works. I know from prior experience, I needed medication. I went and, kind of talked about those, did the new medication I need, sought the help of a psychiatrist to make sure I'm on the right combinations of meds, things like that. I did whatever I could to help myself get better, because I no longer sat in shame. I no longer sat in embarrassment or guilt or any stigma to say, I have an anxiety issue, I need to deal with it. I right away was like, yep, I've lived this. I know how this feels. I know what to do. I'm good. And that's the thing. See, I don't see mental illness as a detrimental life changing, ending thing for me anymore. For me now, if I go through mental illness, it's like, well, let's use that to my benefit. Because I had a mental illness before, I now recognize the signs. I now know how to get help. So that mental illness postpartum journey actually served me well in life. It opened up a lot of doors. So I see the benefits of having a mental illness versus just focusing on the negative that really horrific 2.5 year experience was. I don't dismiss that, and I don't diminish, how hard it was. But in the long run, it's helped me. And I think that's how we build resiliency, is being able to take seemingly negative things and say, I'm going to do something positive from this. I'm going to learn something positive. And when you do that, you can get out of negative situations faster and with more ease.
Those that absolutely 100%. I think that is so true. And that resiliency is what allows us to grow. I mean, I've talked before about what I struggled with postpartum, and a lot of it was postpartum OCD and trauma from the NICU. But I think for the longest time, this took years for me to get there, like with therapy and all of that, to be grateful, not for the fact that we were in the NICU or any of that, but at the same time, I'm grateful that I learned how to deal with anxiety of OCD and this just crippling anxiety. Like I looked up what worry meant in etymology, and it means to seize by the throat and tear. And I was like, God, that's how I feel sometimes. And it may not be just with OCD, but like with anxiety. Those are sensations that I had to figure out how to, and this is a lot of how I even like came up with mental back roads and highways, is I have a highway of having feelings seizing me by the throat and tearing. How do I take a back road, and how do I do that? And over time, I became more resilient, and I understood that thoughts are just thoughts. We can push forward with thinking of it almost like mindfulness with a river, thinking of my thought washing down the streams. That's what helps me with like my OCD, but also knowing that some things will trigger it, like and then just being aware of it and then advocating for myself. And like you're saying, not being shameful of the anxiety, saying, I know I tend to worry in these situations. I think worst case scenario, when I go to doctors, I can sometimes really get heightened anxiety about it
Mhm,
now. So I know what to do. Like I'll go take a run, or I'll maybe, send my spouse to go. So I can, you kind of think of a game plan.
mhm.
And that's not to diminish what I went through, but at the same time, I learned from it. And now helping others. So
Mhm.
it's amazing, Yalda.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. I think uh, life is how we choose to see it.
Yes.
And hardships will always be there. Difficult
Yeah.
circumstances will happen in so many different ways. And um, it's really what we choose to do with it that will allow us to flourish or to kind of take this road that doesn't serve us. And
Yes.
so we can choose, like you said, which back road to take. The
Mhm.
road that takes us down a path that sets us up for more difficulty and hardship, or the road that allows us to heal and continue having a positive life, even if we have any sort of mental illness diagnosis or things. Like I said, there's people who, for example, have lifelong enduring mental illness conditions and diagnoses. And that doesn't mean they can't lead happy, productive lives. It just means you need to have the right resources and support in place to be able to do that. And the more we learn, the more we change our perspectives, the more we can help ourselves as well as others, right? We can ease somebody else's journey too by being educated and aware and
Mhm.
not seeing it in such a negative way, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Yalda, as we wrap up here, I feel like I can talk with you all day. I
Mhm.
just love everything you have to say. And I really just want our listeners to make sure they know how to access your website and where we can find you. And you said everything is on yaldakazemi.com. Is that right? That's where we can get to your book and learn more about you?
Correct, correct. Yeah, I have the link to the Amazon link. I have the Canadian one, so you can find it on Amazon anywhere globally. To my book itself, if the book is run out of copies on Amazon, you can just put it on your wish list, and it'll trigger kind of the physical copies to show up again. Otherwise, it is available on all the ebook platforms as well. So Apple Books, Kindle, Google Play, Kobo, Nook, all of those. And also Friesen Press is the company that did the publishing for my book. So they also would have the book, the physical copies on their website as well.
It's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Yalda. I really appreciate your time. And I also want to give a quick shout out to Brian Bashand, who introduced us, Evolution. He's a incredible guy. And definitely check him out, as well as Gretchen with, I don't know if I can say it, SH exclamation mark T
Yeah.
goes on in our heads.
Mhm.
Gretchen, yeah, G Rex and Dirty Skittles are their stage names. They're awesome
Yeah.
as well. So we've been
Yeah.
like all talking, and so check them out. They'll also be on Two Mamas to Love. They have an episode, Brian's episode's coming up. But again, Yalda, you're such an inspiration.
Thank you.
Everyone here that's listening, you are enough. You are worthy. And I wish you a blessed day, and I hope everyone out there is going to enjoy the day in some way that makes themselves know that you're worthy. Take some type of back road today, knowing that you're worthy and knowing that you're enough, and that reaching out for support if needed, or whatever that is. So thank you again.
Thank you as well. And it's been a pleasure. And yeah, I'm excited for more conversations to continue in this space, hopefully.
Me too. Well, have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. And bye,
Bye.
Andrew. Thank you for all your comments. Thank you, Andrew.